Welcome back. I can feel you out there listening. From big cities and small towns, all across the map. Thank you for sticking with me. This story, it's the hardest one I've ever told. Because we've reached the moment where choices run out. Where all that's left is action and consequence. I was standing in Arthur Brandt's study. The cold, polished floor under my feet. The weight of the stolen tablet in my hands. And John Carter, my past, my ghost, standing in the doorway with a gun. A small, ugly pistol that looked like a toy but promised nothing but an ending. The air was so still I could hear the hum of the shielded room's power supply. Carter's smile was a thin, cruel line. The tablet keeper. And the drive. Don't make this messy. I'd hate for your son to get a call about a break-in gone wrong at some financier's house. So tragic. So random. He used my son's name like a tool. A lever to pry me open. And it worked. A white-hot bolt of protective fury shot through the cold focus of the keeper. But I didn't move. I just stood there in the shadow behind the door, letting him see only my silhouette, the faint gleam of the tablet in my hands. My mind was a storm. A calculation of 1,000 variables, moving at the speed of lightning. The gun. The distance. The sensor in the hallway. The USB drive, warm against my skin under my shirt. Thorne's key. Carter took a step into the room. You're sentimental now. That's your weakness. You care about the son who betrayed you. You care about this stranger, Brandt, and his family photos. Sentiment is a flaw. It makes you slow. He was right. And he was wrong. The love for my son wasn't a flaw. It was the reason. The reason I left. The reason I was here. The reason I had to win. It wasn't a weakness. It was the source of all my strength. The drive, Carter, I said, my voice surprisingly steady in the thick silence. How did you know? He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. I didn't. Not for sure. Thorne was a genius, but he was also proud. Arrogant. He would never let his work be truly lost. He would leave a key. A backdoor. And you were the only one who ever got close enough to him to find it. I've been waiting 25 years for you to lead me to it. The Brandt job was just convenient bait. So it was all a lie. A trap set decades in the making. My retirement, my peace, it was just the long, quiet part of his operation. The thought was so vast, so horrifying, it almost made me dizzy. He'd been a shadow on the wall of my entire second life. My employers don't care about Brandt's list, Carter continued, taking another casual step closer. The gun never wavered. They want what Thorne hid. The master key. With that, we don't need to strong-arm financiers. We can become them. We can walk into any bank, any vault, any government server designed by Thorne or his disciples. It's not a tool keeper. It's a kingdom. And you're holding the crown. He was close enough now that I could see the fine lines around his cold eyes. Close enough that I could see his finger resting beside the trigger guard. Not on the trigger. Not yet. He was too confident for that. He'd already won. That was his mistake, that he thought my sentiment made me slow. He didn't see that it made me desperate. And a desperate man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous animal of all. My plan formed in an instant. It was a house of cards. It relied on Thorne's genius, on Carter's arrogance, and on a split second of chaos. I had to trigger the sensor in the hallway. But I couldn't move. The tablet in my hands was my only tool. All right, I said, letting my shoulders slump, the fight draining from my posture. Playing the defeated old man. The part that came so easily now. You win, Carter. The kingdom is yours. I slowly, bent my knees as if to place the tablet on the floor. A gesture of surrender. Carter's eyes followed the movement. Just for a fraction of a second, his gaze dipped from my face to the prize. In that fraction of a second, I didn't place the tablet down. I shoved it hard across the polished floor. It shot like a puck, skidding past Carter's feet, through the study doorway, and into the hall. It was a childish move. A desperate, stupid move. Carter's eyes flickered with annoyance, then amusement. He didn't even look at it. Really? That's your play? But he was wrong. It wasn't the play. It was the distraction. The tablet slid directly through the beam of the redundant motion sensor Thorne had hidden in the hallway ceiling ornament. A soft, almost inaudible sound from within the walls. Then chaos. The house didn't scream. It reacted. Every smart light in the hallway and study blazed to maximum, blinding, retina-searing white. At the same instant, the built-in sound system, synced to the security, erupted not with an alarm, but with a deafening, screeching cascade of white noise. A sonic weapon designed to disorient and panic. Carter flinched, his free hand flying up to shield his eyes, a snarl of surprise and pain on his face. The gun wavered. That was my window that I didn't go for the gun. That's what he'd expect. I moved toward him, inside his reach, as the blinding light and skull-splitting noise filled the world. I drove my shoulder into his chest, not to knock him down, but to spin him, to disrupt his balance. My left hand closed over his gun hand, forcing it upward as my right drove a short, sharp punch into the nerve cluster under his ribs that he grunted, the air exploding from his lungs. The gun didn't go off. My grip on his wrist was iron, a grip strengthened by a lifetime of manual labor, of holding on. I twisted, using his own momentum against him. We crashed into the door jamb, a tangle of limbs. The white noise was a physical pressure. The light turned everything into stark, shadowless hell. We were two old men fighting in a silent movie of pure pain that he was strong, fueled by a lifetime of malice. He drove a knee toward my gut. I turned, taking it on my hip, the impact shuddering through my bones. I headbutted him, not with the crown of my head, but with my forehead into his nose. There was a wet, crunching sound that he roared, a sound lost in the white noise. His grip on the gun slackened for a millisecond. That was all I needed that I wrenched the pistol from his hand. It came free. I didn't point it at him. I didn't have time. I simply dropped it and kicked it, sending it skittering across the floor into the dark corner of the study, under a heavy cabinet that we were disarmed. Both of us. He shoved me back, blood streaming from his broken nose, his eyes wild with a rage I'd never seen. The polished, controlled Carter was gone. This was the animal underneath. "You're dead," he screamed, the words shredded by the noise. "You and your whole bloodline. I'll burn it all." He lunged at me, not with technique, but with pure, killing hatred. I was ready. The keeper was gone now, too. This wasn't about skill. This was about survival. This was a father fighting for the right to see his son on Sunday, that we fell to the floor in a brutal, graceless heap. His hands found my throat. Thumbs pressed into my windpipe. The world began to tunnel, the blinding light fading to gray at the edges. I clawed at his face, my fingers finding the ruin of his nose. He screamed again, but his grip only tightened. Black spots danced in my vision. I couldn't breathe. This was it. This was how it ended. In a stranger's house, fighting a ghost, for reasons my son would never understand. But then my flailing hand, scraping across the floor, brushed against something. The chain around my neck. The USB drive. Thorne's key. With the last of my strength, I didn't pull at the chain. I yanked it sideways, hard. The clasp, old and fragile, snapped. The drive came free in my hand. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. But I could move my arm. I drove my fist, with the silver drive clenched inside it, into the side of Carter's head. Right at the temple. It wasn't a knockout blow. It was a sting. A distraction. His grip loosened just a fraction. A gasp of air burned into my lungs. I did it again. And again. Not trying to hit hard. Just trying to hit the same spot. Asterisk tap. 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 Asterisk on the third tap, Carter's body suddenly went rigid. Not unconscious. Seized. His eyes rolled back in his head. A low, guttural moan escaped his lips. His hands fell away from my throat that I scrambled out from under him, coughing, dragging in huge, ragged breaths. He was on the floor, twitching, his limbs moving in jerky, uncoordinated spasms. I stared, horrified. What had I done? Then I saw it. A tiny, almost invisible trickle of blood from his ear. And I understood. The USB drive. It wasn't just data. Thorne, paranoid to the end, must have lined it with something. A microfilament. A conductive material. A last-ditch defensive weapon. My repeated taps to the temple had driven it inward, disrupting something. A mini-stroke. A neural shock. The white noise cut off abruptly. The lights dimmed to their normal level. The sudden silence was louder than the noise had been. The only sounds were my wheezing breaths and Carter's wet, ragged gasps on the floor that he was alive. But he wasn't getting up. Not for a long time. I stood there, trembling, every muscle screaming. I looked at the man who had haunted my life. Broken. Beaten. Not by a superior agent, but by a father's love and an inventor's paranoia that I didn't feel triumph. I felt sick. And I felt a crushing urgency that it was over. But it wasn't finished. I retrieved the tablet from the hallway. I found Carter's gun and emptied the bullets, pocketing them. I took his phone. Then I went to Brant's home computer. Using Thorne's key, I accessed it fully. I didn't look at Brant's list. I didn't want to know. Instead, I created an encrypted package. I included Brant's list. I included every piece of data I could pull from Carter's phone about his employers, their operations, their threats. and I included a copy of Thorne's master key with a single prominent flaw programmed into its core. A flaw that would cause any system it accessed to silently send an alert to a specific, untraceable digital dead drop I set up. A honeypot for snakes. I addressed the package to 3 places. The Financial Crimes Division of the FBI, the office of a journalist known for digging into corruption, and Arthur Brandt's personal email with a note. You have a week to come clean before this goes public. Use it. Protect your girls. I set a delayed send for 48 hours. A head start for Brandt. A ticking clock for the wolves. Then I wiped everything. I left the house as I found it, except for 2 things I took. The tablet and John Carter. I couldn't leave him there. He'd wake up, and he'd come for me for my son, with everything he had. I half-dragged, half-carried his limp, heavy body out to his own black car. I put him in the passenger seat. I drove his car, following my own in a grim procession, to a place I knew from my old life. A private, discreet clinic on the edge of the city that asked no questions for a price. A place where men like us went to disappear when we were broken. I paid them with cash from my safe deposit box. A lot of cash. He had a stroke, I told the impassive nurse. He needs care. Long-term care. And no visitors. Ever. They nodded. They'd seen it before. John Carter would become a nameless patient in a quiet room, his mind and body shattered. A ghost, finally laid to rest. The sun was coming up by the time I got home. I stood under a scalding shower, but I couldn't wash away the feeling of his hands on my throat, or the sound of his skull under my fist. I burned the clothes I'd worn. I dismantled and disposed of the tools. Then, I sat at my kitchen table. The place where I'd had coffee with my son 1,000 times. I put 2 things on the table. The silver USB drive and my simple, old phone. I picked up my phone. I called my son. It rang twice. Dad. His voice was thick with sleep and worry. It's me, I said. My voice was rough, bruised. I'm okay. I wanted to hear your voice. Dad, you sound terrible. What's wrong? Nothing, I said, and for the first time, it felt like it might eventually be true. Just a bad dream. Go back to sleep. I'll see you Sunday. For dinner. Okay, he said, trust and concern warring in his tone. I love you, Dad. The words were a bomb and a knife. I love you too, son. More than anything. I hung up. I looked at the USB drive. Thorne's kingdom. Carter's obsession. My final secret. I took a hammer from my toolbox. I placed the drive on the concrete floor of my garage. I didn't hesitate. I brought the hammer down. Once. Twice. 3 times. Until it was a sparking, shattered ruin of plastic and silicon. I swept the pieces into a bag, and later, I would drive to a bridge and scatter them into the deep, fast-moving river current. Gone. The next few days were a blur of normalcy. I mowed my lawn. I grocery shopped. I read the paper. The world didn't end. No black cars came. On Sunday evening, my son and his wife came for dinner. He was nervous. She was subdued, her eyes avoiding mine. But they came. They brought wine. She offered to help in the kitchen. We sat at my small table. The conversation was awkward, then halting, then real. We talked about his work. We talked about my garden. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about pins. We talked about his mother. We told stories about her. We laughed, and my son cried a little, and I held his hand across the table. It was the best dinner I'd had in 20 years. When they left, my son hugged me at the door. A real hug. Tight. Long. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered into my shoulder. I know, I whispered back. Me too. I watched their car drive away. The street was empty. No silhouettes. No black sedans. Just the quiet hum of a suburban night. I went inside. I was an old man, tired in his bones. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the ache. I had saved my son. I had neutralized my demon. I had given a stranger a chance at redemption. But as I locked my front door, a new thought crept in, cold and quiet. I had used Thorne's key. I had sent that data package. I had stirred a hornet's nest of very powerful, very dangerous people. Carter's employers. They lost their man. They lost their prize. They would be looking. Not for a retired nobody named Dad, but for the ghost who did it. For the keeper. The package would lead the authorities to them. It would create chaos, distraction. But men like that, they have long arms. And longer memories. The fight in Brandt's house wasn't the end. It was just the end of the beginning. I am safe today. My son is safe today. But the keeper knows that safety is an illusion. It's a quiet space between storms. And the wind is starting to change. I keep my old phone charged. I watch the news. I look at every strange car a little too long. Because here is the final truth, the one I leave you with tonight. You can bury the past. You can shatter the keys. You can defeat the monster at your door. But the world is full of monsters. And once they know a keeper exists, they never stop looking. So that's my story. The story of the night my son gave away my PIN, and I showed him, and myself, who I really am. What would you have done? Would you have destroyed the key? Would you have saved Carter? Would you have trusted your son again? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. And tell me where you're watching from. It makes this big world feel a little smaller. This chapter is closed. But the book? The book is never finished. Stay safe. Hold your people close. And remember, the quiet man in the corner might just be the most dangerous person in the room. Good night. And thank you for listening.